All right, ready to dive in. Today, we're looking at information warfare.
Ooh, sounds intense.
It is, but with a fascinating twist. We're not talking about, government agencies and supercomputers.
Right.
It's about citizen activists. They call themselves the Elves.
The Elves, I like it already.
Me too. And get this, they're going head-to-head with disinformation, especially the kind backed by, Russia comes to mind.
Interesting.
So today, we're going to unpack how they're doing it, and what's even more surprising is how successful they've been.
And all ears.
Me too, honestly. So to kick things off, maybe you could give us a little background on these elves. Like, where did they even come from?
Well, the Elves, they actually started in Lithuania. Lithuania has been a target of Russian disinformation for years.
So they were kind of on the front lines of this.
Exactly. About a decade ago, people there, they started noticing these, almost coordinated online campaigns spreading all sorts of false narratives.
Like what kind of narrative?
Oh, the usual suspects, painting Lithuania as like a failed state, pushing pro-Kremlin agendas, that sort of thing.
Sounds familiar, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately it is. So what happened was these individuals, they came from all walks of life, they saw this happening, and they decided enough is enough.
So they banded together.
They did, and they took on this name, the Elves, which I gotta say I find kind of charming. This image of these mythical creatures fighting back against the darkness,
I love that. And I'm curious, what kind of people are we talking about here? Are we talking tech wizards, hackers?
Not necessarily. You've got teachers, lawyers, business people. There's even a member of the Lithuanian parliament who's secretly an elf.
No way.
It really shows you the dedication. These people are working late into the night, often juggling this with their day jobs. It's a lot of personal sacrifice.
Driven by a strong sense of purpose, it sounds like.
Absolutely. A sense of civic duty, a desire to protect their communities from the harms of disinformation. They're really putting in the work.
It's inspiring. Speaking of the work, we read about these cyber scouts. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. So the Elves, they've developed all these fascinating tactics to combat disinformation. The cyber scouts, they're like the eyes and ears of the operation. They infiltrate online communities where, let's just say where the trolls hang out.
Right.
They monitor everything, emerging narratives, potential threats. They're basically an early warning system for disinformation.
So they're not just reacting, they're out there proactively searching.
Exactly. They're not waiting for the disinformation to spread, they're trying to catch it at the source. But it's not just monitoring, they've got these double agents too.
Double agents. Now that sounds like something out of a spy movie.
Oh, it kind of is. These elves, they actually join pro-Kremlin groups. They observe everything, gather evidence. It can be pretty risky, but it gives them an inside look at how these groups operate.
Wow, talk about going undercover. But then there are the debunking units. Those sound a bit more straightforward.
Right. These units, they're all about tackling disinformation head-on. They use fact-checking, evidence-based arguments. They're like a rapid response team, ready to challenge false claims whenever they pop up.
Like a digital myth-busting squad?
Exactly. But it's not just about cold, hard facts. The Elves, they also understand the power of narrative, the psychology behind why people believe certain things.
That makes sense.
So they use humor, satire, even things like chain emails to counter disinformation.
Chain emails? Seriously?
Yeah. They figure if disinformation can spread that way, so can the truth. It's all about adapting to the medium, meeting people where they are.
Clever. And it sounds like it's working. They've had some pretty impressive wins.
Oh, definitely. They were instrumental in getting those Russian outlets, Sputnik and RT, blocked in Lithuania years before other countries took similar action.
Wow, so they were ahead of the curve.
Big time. And it's not just about Lithuania. Their findings, their methods, they're shared internationally, helping others understand and counter these tactics.
So they're really making a global impact.
They are. And they're doing it all without massive funding, without big institutions backing them. It's really quite remarkable.
A true grassroots movement.
Absolutely. And it shows what a dedicated group of people can achieve when they set their minds to it.
It's inspiring, really. And it makes you think, what can we as individuals do to support their work?
That's a great question, and one we'll definitely be exploring further. But for now, I think the biggest takeaway is this. The Elves are proof that we don't have to be passive in the face of disinformation. We all have a role to play.
Absolutely. So it really is inspiring, their dedication. But you have to wonder, how do they keep going? I mean, fighting disinformation all the time, it sounds exhausting.
It is. You're right, it takes a toll.
And we read about the risks, too, like facing repercussions in their personal lives.
Exactly. It's a constant battle, and the trolls, they're not exactly playing fair.
It sounds almost overwhelming.
It can be. It's like you said, a David and Goliath situation. They're up against these well-funded, sophisticated disinformation machines.
And yet they're still making a difference.
They are. And their successes, like with those Russian outlets or during the pandemic with the vaccine stuff, it shows that even small groups can have a big impact.
It all comes back to that grassroots aspect, right? Like, they're not some big organization with tons of resources.
Exactly. They're everyday people stepping up to do what they can. It's pretty remarkable.
It really is. And it makes you think, what can we do? I mean, we can't all become elves overnight.
Right.
But surely there are ways we can support them, right?
Absolutely. Even small actions can help. For starters, just spreading the word about what they do, the challenges they face, that's huge.
Like raising awareness.
Exactly. Because these guys, they are the unsung heroes of the information war. They deserve recognition. But beyond that, there are things we can do in our own lives to be more discerning about information.
So like channeling our inner cyber scout.
Exactly. Instead of just passively scrolling, really paying attention to the conversations happening around you, the narratives taking hold.
Like in our own social circles.
Everywhere. Online, at work, even with family. If something seems off, ask questions. Dig a little deeper. Don't be afraid to challenge things.
But sometimes it feels like confronting disinformation just leads to argument.
Yeah, and that's where the Elves approach comes in. Remember, they use humor, creativity.
Right, the chain emails, the memes.
Exactly. Think about how you can do the same thing. Maybe it's sharing a witty meme that subtly exposes a disinformation tactic, or writing a funny blog post that highlights the absurdity of a conspiracy theory. It's about using humor to plant seeds of doubt, encouraging critical thinking.
So it's like instead of lecturing, we're sneaking in the truth through the back door.
Exactly. And remember the chain emails? Well, we can adapt that too. Imagine a chain letter, but instead of rumors, it's full of debunk myths and credible information.
Like a chain letter of truth. I love it.
Right. It's about taking those tactics and turning them on their head. And then there's the double agent approach.
Ooh, that sounds intriguing.
Well, maybe we're not infiltrating troll networks, but we can be more mindful of the information we consume ourselves.
So like being more selective about what we read, what we share.
Exactly. Diversify your news sources, look for perspectives that challenge your own biases, and be wary of anything that feels overly sensational or emotionally charged.
So basically, don't just take things at face value.
Right. Develop that healthy skepticism, question everything. But we can take it a step further too. Remember how the elves work together? We can do that too.
You mean like forming our own little elf squads?
Exactly. Connect with like-minded people, share resources, support each other. Maybe you create a group chat dedicated to debunking myths, or launch a social media campaign to highlight disinformation tactics.
Turning it into a collective effort. I like it.
Because that's where real change happens. And don't forget about that redirect method we talked about. Use your own digital skills to steer people away from harmful content.
So like creating websites that debunk myths or promoting fact-checking resources.
Exactly. Imagine a network of digital signposts guiding people away from disinformation and towards credible sources.
Like a roadmap to the truth.
I like that. And the best part is you can use your own strengths, your own passions to do this.
So like if you're a graphic designer, maybe you create visuals that counter disinformation.
Yeah.
Or if you're a writer, you craft compelling stories that promote critical thinking.
Exactly. And if you're tech savvy, you could help develop tools that make it easier to identify and debunk disinformation. There are so many possibilities.
It's about finding your own way to contribute, to be an elf in your own right.
And remember, every little bit helps. Sharing a fact check, reporting a misleading post, even having a respectful conversation with someone who's spreading disinformation, it all adds up.
It's about changing the culture, making it less acceptable to just blindly consume and spread this stuff.
And ultimately, it's not about winning an argument. It's about helping people see the world more clearly, empowering them to make informed decisions.
And creating a more truthful, more open online environment, which, let's face it, we could all use a bit more of.
Couldn't agree more.
So we've talked about how we can all be a little bit more elf-like in our own lives.
Right.
But before we wrap things up, I wanted to touch on something you mentioned earlier about like the ethical side of all this.
Oh, yeah, that's important.
Because it'd be easy to get caught up in, fighting fire with fire, like using those same manipulative tactics to counter disinformation.
It's tempting, for sure. But, the elves, they've resisted that. They're really committed to truth and ethical engagement.
Yeah, they don't want to become the very thing they're fighting against.
Exactly. And it seems to be working.
Yeah, we talked about how they influence policy decisions like getting those Russian outlets blocked in Lithuania.
And that was years ago, too. They were way ahead of the curve.
So their work is actually being taken seriously, even at a government level.
Definitely. Governments around the world are finally waking up to the threat of disinformation. And a lot of them are looking to the elves for, inspiration and guidance.
That's pretty amazing to think about. Like, this grassroots movement is shaping national and international security strategies.
It really is. It just goes to show you the power of, regular people coming together to make a difference.
Right, because they didn't have any special resources or funding or anything.
Nope. Just their own time and dedication.
Which makes it even more remarkable, honestly.
Yeah.
But like we've been saying, they can't do it alone.
Right.
We all have to do our part. And we've talked about a lot of different ways to do that, like fact-checking, promoting media literacy, supporting those organizations, fighting disinformation.
All of that is important, but I think there's one more element that's absolutely crucial: resilience.
Resilience. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about it. Disinformation, it thrives on chaos. It wants to divide us, make us fearful, undermine our trust in each other.
So resilience is about, not letting it get to us.
That's part of it. But it's also about, strengthening ourselves and our communities, making it harder for those tactics to work in the first place.
So not just spotting the disinformation, but also withstanding its effects.
Exactly. Maintaining that healthy skepticism, but not falling into cynicism, remembering that there are good people out there too, people working to promote truth and understanding.
Yeah, because it's easy to get discouraged sometimes.
It is. But even small acts of kindness, compassion, they can make a difference. Correcting a misleading post, having a respectful conversation with someone who's spreading disinformation.
It's about reclaiming those spaces, making them more open and honest.
That's it. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about winning some kind of war against disinformation. It's about building a better world.
A more informed world.
A more resilient world.
A more compassionate world.
Exactly. And the elves, they've shown us that it's possible. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with this. How will you contribute? What will you do to make a difference?
Because every little bit counts.
It really does. And by working together, I truly believe we can create a world where truth wins out.
Your trust is restored.
And where those trolls, they don't stand a chance.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay hopeful.